What is your worst story from the throw him in the pool he will learn how to swim parenting style? Hurt my arm playing football during morning break at school. Was sent home by the school nurse. My dad said it was fine. Bandaged it and sent me to school the next day only for them to send me home again within an hour. My mum made my dad take me to hospital and my arm was broken. My wrist had split lengthways. It was in casts for 9 months. I was secretly buzzing to be honest because, well, that showed him the knob. 2 days after I graduated high school I came home to an empty house. All my stuff in a U-Haul because my mom and stepdad moved without me. I have been financially independent ever since. But a heads up would have been nice. That is horrible. Those first few months must have been so difficult for you. Did they even leave you any money at all to get you started? Nope. Just the money I had saved from my part-time job. The heads up would have been nice because I spent most of my savings on my prom dress. LOL. I was fortunate enough to be able to couch surf while I got my bearings. At that point the only plan I had to cling to was going to college, so I took out the loans and made a new life for myself. I moved into the dorms, then eventually found apartments in the area and worked a lot of odd jobs to pay for rent and bills. I'm 22 now with a BS, a good career, a 401k and a nice 2-bedroom townhouse all to myself. The past couple years have been absolutely insane, but I really did it all on my own. My younger cousin, 4 at the time, was a climber and always needed help getting down. His dad told his mom to leave him. He will either learn how to get down himself or stop climbing. Cousin ended up climbing onto the roof, fell off and got impaled on a fence pole. One very expensive trip to the ER, and he now has a cool scar on his thigh. Not a parental neglect story, but that reminds me of being 6 and jumping off our 2-story house. My family was roofers and they were fixing the roof. My uncle was walking around the driveway and I decided it would be fun to yell, "Catch me," as I leaped. He did indeed catch me. My parents about had heart attacks laughing my butt off. When I was about 5 or 6, I was very sick with a flu, fever, vomiting, sweating, congestion. It was awful. There was some mix up at the pharmacy and they thought I was my father and gave him adult medication, basically these giant horse pills. Now, normal child medication for things like this are syrups and chewable shit for obvious reasons. My dad comes home and tells me I have to take these meds. I have a hard time getting them down, almost choking a few times. My dad got frustrated and literally started shoving these huge pills down my sore throat with his angrily shaking fingers. I started crying. My nose was stuffed, so I could only breathe through my mouth. I remember my dad's wedding ring banging against my teeth, eyes watering, gasping for air while looking at my mom for help. Eventually I coughed it back up, crying and throat on fire. I remember my mom demanding an apology from my dad, who just said, "Well, he's going to have to learn to take pills like that sometime anyway," and stormed off. Damn, I haven't thought about that story in 20+ years. Holy crap. I have a really similar experience to that. I started getting migraines back when I was around 11, 12, and I got a really bad one while I was up at my parents' vacation house with a friend. We were watching a movie and it started to hurt pretty badly. I wanted to get some kind of chewable pain reliever because of my fear of choking. My dad pulled out a bottle of these massive tablets of aspirin and says I can take these or suffer through the headache. I tried to swallow them with water, but I literally could not and spat them out. Growing increasingly angry, my dad finally grabbed a marshmallow from our pantry, waved it in front of my face before he stuffed the 2 tablets in them. He then grabbed me by the head like it was a baseball and forced my jaw open and stuffed the marshmallow tablet lump down my throat and forcing me to swallow. It hurt so bad and I was terrified I'd choke to death. I started to cry and then he screamed at me to shut up. My friend saw the whole thing and would not look at my dad for the rest of the trip. Your comment brought that memory back, and damn, our parents are screwed up. My mom forced me to drink milk and she thought I just hate healthy stuff and only prefer junk food. The thing is, I always loved veggies, but I also like junk food. Basically I love food except for milk. I just could not consume milk. It had make me vomit, and I did have sudden acid reflux not being able to handle it. She thought I was acting to escape, but I just hated it. Turns out I'm lactose intolerant and my mom still thinks I'm making that up, just because she cannot let go of her ego. Literally the exact same thing happened to me. I will give my parents credit. They are overall great parents, especially with my younger siblings. But as the oldest there was multiple duck ups. One of them was the constant fights over milk. I vividly remember at least 3 times where I ended up sitting at the table for hours because I simply couldn't finish a glass of milk. The most memorable was when we were on vacation. I was once again in trouble for not drinking milk and was told to sit there until I finished it. Well, after a while they left the dining room and I started slowly pouring it in my baby brother's milk rack that was by the table. Unfortunately it did not hold a lot. So then I resorted to pouring the rest into a fake plant. Cue my mom walking in and realizing what I was doing. She refilled the glass halfway and sat there while she made me chug it. Not only did I projectile vomit, I had bad diarrhea the coming day. Ended up being the last time they fought with me about milk, lol. My mom's whole parenting style was sink or swim, but funny enough, it is when my mom tossed me in the pool. The summer between 1st and 2nd grade my family moved somewhere with a pool. My mom was adamant that I had learned to swim as a baby, so she bought floaties for my younger sister and refused to buy any for me because I already knew how to swim and was too big for floaties. When I refused to get into any part of the pool I could not walk in, my mom called me from outside the pool and promptly grabbed me and tossed me into the 6-foot end. And surprise, I did not know how to swim. I remember splashing twice, hearing my mom yell at me to stop panicking. Then I went under and tried swimming to the surface like I did seen in movies, and eventually got my head a bit above water, coughed out a bunch of water and started screaming for help before I went under again. My mom told me to stop making a scene and swim towards the edge. I made it to the edge and could not pull myself out of the pool, so my mom yelled at me to swim to the shallow end. When I tried to grab onto the edge to just pull myself to the shallow ends, my mom kept taking my fingers off the edge and yelling for me to stop playing and just swim. When I finally got to the shallow part, my mom and family just went, "See, you still remember how to swim. You never forget." I was at the beach one time and it was hot out. I could not walk on the sand without sandals on. I heard a cry and looked up to see a little girl standing barefoot on the sand, not more than 2, screaming for her dad, 5 feet away, who just told her to stop being such a little pussy. Just about had a rage stroke and ran over to pick her up myself, but he eventually did. I do not know if this counts, but stop crying or I'll give you a reason to cry, something my dad used to say to me. It would send me into a panic. I was upset and did not know how to stop crying, and then hearing that would make it worse because now I'm crying cause my dad was mad at me, and if I did not stop crying he was gonna make me cry even more. I remember once being unable to stop crying because my mom was going to work and I didn't want her to leave. My dad yelled at me and sent me to my room. Then he came in, pulled me off my bed, spanked me, and tossed me back on the bed. I didn't stop crying, of course. And I look back on it now like, how in the world would anyone look at a 6-year-old crying because she doesn't want her mom to leave and think, if I beat her ass, that will make this entire situation better. I actually used to be a swim teacher in college, teaching private lessons in people's backyards because of parents who had thrown their kids into the pool to sink or swim. It was usually moms calling me for help because they heard from a friend of a friend that I was able to teach their kid and get them to like the water again in about a month or less. One kid, he was 7. I had to sit with him on the pool deck the whole first lesson and bring buckets of water to him. His dad had dunked him multiple times and insisted that his son would just figure it out eventually because that is how he learned. Needless to say, he was never home when I was there. The mom had me come while dad was at work. 4 weeks later she had me come later in the afternoon so he would come home towards the end of the lesson. His dad saw his son swimming and cried happy tears. He had no idea I had been there 3 days a week for a month. My favorite student was a 70-year-old man who wanted to do a triathlon, but never learned to swim because his dad threw him in as a child. It took about 3 months total. A lot of hand holding on the steps and shallow end. But he finally achieved his goal, and I got to cheer him on at the finish line. I still remember how each of my students clung to my arms and clawed at my neck in their first lessons. I never dunked or forced anyone out of their comfort zone. My lessons had to be customized for each student to keep it fun and relaxing. The trauma in their eyes was haunting though. It stayed with me, and I never force anything on my kids that they are not ready to do. It is about trust, not force. I wish every swim instructor was like how you were. I always had a fear of water and pools, so my parents signed me up for private lessons so I could learn. I think I was like 10 at the time. The first lesson the teacher I was supposed to learn from couldn't be there, so she had a colleague fill in. He had been told I was afraid, and instead of easing me into it, he started dumping buckets of water on my head when I refused to go deeper than just deep. I think somehow my lack of movement due to fear annoyed this guy or something. I don't know why else a grown man would aggressively dump water on a kid while she cried. Pretty sure he was laughing at me for being upset too. In the end, after many lessons, I learned to swim a few strokes down a pool, but not to tread water. So I might still drown one day, I guess. I'm so sorry. That is so tragic. I had each kid bring several water safe toys, and we often spent the first lesson just sitting on the steps and playing, talking, or singing. Once they knew me, I did ask their permission to pick them up and hold them while I stood in the shallow end and just swayed and talked. It was like therapy. But I'm not a therapist. My one rule was no parents on the pool deck until the kid was jumping in and swimming on their own. I told them they could and should watch from a window, but they were not allowed to be out to try and talk over me or help coach. I ended up babysitting and filling in as a substitute nanny for most families. I went to so many kids' birthday parties as a 22-year-old too. It was hilarious. But I usually got 10 more clients at each party, and I genuinely cared about the kids too. This was in a very posh area of Southern California. I still have a photo album with all the pictures they drew for me and all the little handwritten thank you notes from kids. My kids like looking through it now. I was volunteering at a parent-child zoo day and saw a few parents like this. The zoo had some free roaming peacocks, and it was awful how many parents just did not tell their too young to know kids that they can be mean. So the little toddler goes, "Wow, pretty bird," and tries to get a closer look, only to get chased and attacked by this thing while the parents watch. Most of them said something like, "You should have known better," like, how if you never teach them, the child can barely walk, you expect them to remember that some animals have a strong territorial sense, and then your baby gets terrorized by this thing that is bigger than them and looks like an alien for all they know, and you do not even give them a hug. See also that one mom we had to kick out of the zoo because she was encouraging her kids to antagonize the llama in the hopes it would spit on them. Yikes. People, have some empathy for tiny humans who trust you implicitly with their well-being. They did not want to teach me to tie my shoes because my mum said I had to learn that myself. So should you. My in-laws were like this with their kids. So when my husband and I started dating, I got to teach him how to eat without grasping his silverware like a toddler, showed him an easier way to tie his shoes, taught him better hygiene, etc. He was able to do everything on his own, but it was very clear that he had to figure it out on his own, and no one ever bothered to teach or help him at any point. It's amazing how parents forget to or don't realize kids have to be taught certain things. My grandparents taught me a lot and tried to make up for my parents. My dad never tried to teach me anything after walking and speaking, and when she and dad split up, mom was too busy. Most of what I learned as far as life skills go I figured out on my own. Being the oldest child, I was always left in charge of my younger siblings and taught myself how to change diapers and make age appropriate lunches. By the time I was an adult, I had a firm grasp of the basics for a lot of things, but really couldn't cook anything. that didn't come from a box until a combination of my husband and the internet taught me. I have no kids now, and my parents act like it's crazy because as a kid I was such a good little mom. At least the rest of the family seems to understand that being a mom as a kid made me not want to be one as an adult. My mom told me and my sister, 8 and 6 at the time, to run away if we wanted to leave so badly. We were told to do laundry, but didn't exactly know how. So us being young took that opportunity and packed up to leave. 10 minutes later my sister was hit by a drunk driver. I still perfectly remember her Crayola crayon suitcase ducked up in the middle of the road. She was mostly fine from the crash. Just scrapes and bruises. The real pain came from realizing our mother would prefer to challenge us to run away rather than teach us how to do laundry. She's currently NC, and I moved across the ocean. It is better now. Every time I asked my parents to explain something as a kid I was told either you are smart you will figure it out, or you just do not want to do it. Any attempt at maturity was met with either flat out laughter or being told that I was too young to worry about that. Cue me turning 18, and suddenly I'm expected to be an adult, get a job, pay taxes, and all that jazz. I asked where in the heck do I start? And they got pissy because I apparently had not figured anything out. Wonder why. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.